Hello, my name is Lee Taylor, and I really like to knit, so much so that some of my friends call me the Knitwit. I hope you enjoyed today's video and possibly even learned something. So let's get started. This week I'm real excited because we have 4 topics that I'd like to discuss. First, we have project updates. Second, we have more of the stash dive from the yarn behind me. Third, we have swatches that I have prepared for this week's video. And fourth, we have the mystery project. So I hope you enjoy. To get started, we're going to look at my yarn stash, and I actually have to make an amendment. There is one pink that I want to show. I got it the day after I got done filming this last video, but I did buy it a few days before, so I just didn't have access to it yet. So I do want to show you that one, and then we will move on to the reds. Here we go. Okay, here in the overview, we're going to discuss the yarns. So I'm going to start off with the pink that I had purchased, and it got left in my grandmother's car, so I didn't have access to it until the day after I filmed. But I have it now, and so here we go to talk about this. This is a yarn by Big Twist Cotton. It's an Aran weight yarn. There are 55 grams to 96 yards in this, and the colorway is Flamingo Splash, which is not at all hard to imagine that that's what a Flamingo Splash might look like. So this is all cotton. Next, we have a yarn that is by Blue Sky Fibers. This is a DK weight yarn, and it is 40% wool, 30% alpaca, and 30% silk. In 100 grams, there are 210 yards, and the colorway is Red Sky. Now on this one, I would like to point out the shininess of the yarn, and I guess that's probably not a very good. There you can kind of see it looks a bit shiny. It also looks like it's been twisted. The plies are very, very narrow, so it looks like it's really beady and uncomfortable, but it's not. It's actually got a good bit of soft squishiness to it. Here we have Big Twist Value. It is an acrylic yarn. It is an Aran weight, and 170 grams skein will get you 380 yards. Here, as you will see in all of my yarns, they are all wound into a cake. Just because that's the way I knit with them, and you just pull right out of the center and knit, or you can pull from the outside and work your way into the center. I prefer pulling from the inside out whenever possible. This color is Varsity Red, and it is just as bright in person as it is on camera. Next, we have another Big Twist Value acrylic, Aran weight, 170 grams skein gets you 380 yards, but this time the color is Wine. And I figured that was a really nice maroon color that definitely stays firmly in the red cubby. Next, we have Premier brand Just Yarn. It is an Aran weight also. It is acrylic, and the 60 gram skein gets you 113 yards. I'm sorry, 131 yards. And the colorway is Cardinal. It's a little bit of a darker, rich tone than it is on camera. Red, certain colors don't film very well, and reds usually are one of them. I don't know what it is about it, but this is a very nice yarn. Next, we have Queensland Collection is the brand, and the particular variety of that is Coastal Cotton. It is an Aran weight, and this 100 gram skein, or 100 gram cake, gives you 185 yards, and the colorway is Garnet. And this is another one where the color is picking up a little bit brighter than it is in person. It's kind of got a, not exactly muted, there is some variation on shine, but not really a whole lot. So another cotton yarn. Now this cotton yarn, unfortunately, I do not know the brand. I do know it's completely cotton, and I know it's DK weight. And I do not have any label because I bought this secondhand. So with that, I can't give you the yardage for it, but I can show you how I find out the weight. So I have this little kitchen scale with the tare function, which is very handy. So when I know the brand of yarn, I can simply turn on the scale, place my yarn on it. So I have 67 grams. So then I could go on Ravelry and type in 67 grams of this yarn, and it would actually give me the yardage for it. But again, because I don't know the brand, I don't know how much yardage I have. I just know that I have 67 grams, which usually for me is enough. After you've knit for a while, you can kind of just go off of grams rather than yards. Next in the overhead, we'll take a look at a couple of swatches I've knit that show the difference between knits and purls in a way that hopefully makes it a little bit more easy to understand. This week I thought it a good idea to knit a couple of swatches to better illustrate what I mean when I say a knit and a purl, garter, and stockinette. So first off, we have the garter swatch, which you should be very familiar with. I'm going to zoom in a little bit further here. So here is the garter swatch. Now, as you can see, there is a definite ridge here and here. And the reason for that is that the garter on the two edges here and here, are garter from when you knit on this side, and you work back and you knit on this side. So knitting every stitch flat gives you this garter and this garter. This middle section is what happens if you purl every stitch across on both sides. Now, as you can see, they both give you garter, but if we look super close, you will notice there is a slight offset in them. So this row of purl garter lays in the valley of these two rows of garter. Of course, you wouldn't usually have both sets on the same project. Some do, that's how they knit a baby blanket. That way it's all garter, but there's enough interest in it that it's not quite so mindlessly boring to knit. But this is what I mean when I say garter stitch, and this is what I meant when I said you can purl and get garter stitch, but it's going to be slightly different looking than knit. It's not different looking if you look at it like that. It's different looking if you look at it next to knitted garter. So they are alike but similar. And just depends on if you prefer purling everything or knitting everything. So it's also personal preference. So when I talk about stockinette and the knit stitches, I knit this sample here. So here's stockinette, and here you can very easily see the V's. So that right there, that little yellow V is one stitch. So what I did is I did garter, knit garter on the three sides here, and then I did a single row which was just down. I did not turn around and come back. It's just down one row, of this yellow so you can see what those stitches really look like. Up here, we have the exact same situation, except instead of knitting on the right side and purling on the wrong side to give you this stockinette, I knit everything, so that gave you garter. And what that did, after I did the row of yellow, you can see right here, you just have those little color blips, but if you stretch this fabric out, you can see the legs of those stitches as well. Whereas down here, if you stretch this out, you only see the legs. So this kind of shows you that's what the cap looks like, and that's what the legs look like. Now, let's flip this over and see what the back looks like in these two fabrics. So first of all, I don't want to give away yet, garter looks the exact same. And of course it does, because you're doing the same thing. So you have, this time it's at the bottom and kind of curves this way. So sometimes people call that a smile, and the one that curves up the top as a rainbow. So you've got a smile and a rainbow. So you stretch this out and you see the legs of the stitch coming like this with the stitch. So it's the opposite of how this looks on this side. Now obviously if I didn't spin it around and I just did it like this and I spun it that way, they look identical. So it depends on what you're doing, but it's worked the exact same, so that it's no surprise that it's looks the same. Now as for this row of stockinette on the wrong side, this one looks quite different on the back side. So these are called knit stitches, and a lot of times the reverse on reverse stockinette, which is just the back side of stockinette, so it's called knit stitches, and on the other side it's called purl bumps. And here's why. You get the bumps. You get those little color blips. Let me zoom in close so we can see what's going on here. So here's what I was talking about with the umbrella and the smile. Umbrella and smile, umbrella and smile. That is how the stitches work. And when you spread this one out, you can see the legs of the stitches here. So you can see how those stitches are connected. So it swerves down, over, back through the same little loop, comes up and over and down through the same loop, and over and up through the same loop, and it just zigzags across like a snake. So the right side, stretch, you don't see anything but the legs. And you may, if you stretch it like this, you can see. So that's a better way of showing. So then you can see how the stitches work. So when I talk about knits and purls in regards to the two fabrics, that's what's going on. Now in garter, when you knit on both sides and on both, when you do a knit stitch, the back is going to present as a purl stitch. That's the way it works. If you do a purl stitch, the back side is going to present as a knit stitch. So when you have garter, you only see one part of it. So you see the legs here and the little bump, but you don't see the bottom bump. So this right here is a row of knits, a row of purls, a row of knits, a row of purls, even though you're only knitting. That's just the way that it works. Just like stockinette just naturally wants to curl together, garter just naturally makes those little ridges. So on the back, when you spread this, you've got purl bumps underneath knit legs. So you've got a row of purls, a row of knits, a row of purls, and a row of knits. So they are the same in construction when you're doing them, but they present differently. So I hope that somewhat helps, at least seeing what a knit stitch versus a purl stitch actually is and how the stitches interlock in together. In this segment, we will talk about my knitting project updates. 2 will be discussed in this segment, and the final one will be discussed in the next segment to come, because it is the mystery project. I knit a little bit on this, but I also sorted out the yarn and sorted it by weight. So that way when I join the new yarn, I can have 2 cakes of the same size so I don't have to change yarns out as often. I also decided to take away the daily stitch markers and keeping only the row counts markers and the markers to show when the pattern changes. I just felt like the daily markers was not the best use, or not best used in this particular project. I just wanted to keep it a little bit more lighthearted, and although the daily stitch markers can be helpful with seeing how quickly your project progresses, the downside of that is if you only get a little bit each day, then you have the negative side effect of I've spent all of these days on it and I'm only getting this far. So I decided to take out the markers just to keep everything above board. So here is I'm not going to do the up close for this one because again it's just a big rectangle, but I do want to show you this. Let me see if I can get it all. There you go. So the 2 red markers are each 20 ridges. I am almost done with the back of the body, and then I can bind off up to this red stitch marker and start. That would be the underarm shaping, and then would do along this was the back, up along this side, and then bind off for the neck. So I'm almost done with this back panel. So hopefully we'll see a completed panel of this relatively soon. This week, the Scolopendra shawl, I did not make as much progress in it. I had knitted quite a bit, but I ripped it out because I discovered a new way that I wanted to go about it. So this week, most of the update on that is that I have written up the pattern, tentatively. I still have to find test knitters, and then I will publish it in 2 places, my local yarn shop, Mockingbird Moon, and then on Ravelry, which is the Knitters and Crocheters database. So here I will show you from here my project, and then I'll send it over to the overhead to show a little bit more. But this is what I have done so far, and I am quite pleased with it. So from here I will go over to the overhead and show you more about the Scolopendra. Now then, in this section of the overhead, I will show you up close some details about Scolopendra now that I can have it set down. Zoom out just a smidgen. There we go. So there is the entire spine, which is 4 stitches wide at the widest point, and the narrowest there are only 2 stitches. And then you get this transition between these 4 colors. So now that I've shown you this, which is worked in garter stitch, let me show you the Scolopendra that I am working on currently. This colorway, by the way, is retro. I'm gonna leave this like this so you can see this green because it's important for this part. It shows up a little differently on camera. It's basically this color, but a little bit more green and a little bit darker. As you can see, this one is still on the needle. And it will be because I have not finished it. As soon as I finish it, I will block it, and this will be in next week's video. So this, let me show you these double yarn overs here versus these double yarn overs here. Now that's not, shaped out very good. It needs to come over and come out. But these are quite a bit larger than these are, and that happened because when I was knitting this first one, when you make a double yarn over, you take your yarn. I can give you an example right here. So say you're knitting along, and you come and you're ready for a double yarn over, and you have no active stitch fixing to work. So what you do is you take your yarn and you wrap it over. That's 1 yarn over, and then over again, and that's 2. So when you come back and work from the other side, if you was to work only one of those yarn overs, say we're going to knit it, then once we knit it, we have to do something different with this one, because if we try and knit it as well, it doesn't hold on to anything. So what we have to do instead of knitting that one, let me do that again. There we go. Now we got two again, so a double yarn over, because you're a yarn over doubled, so double yarn over. So in this example, and it's fiddly because I don't have any active stitches, but you would go through and we'll knit this first one like so. Then I would bring the yarn around the needle to the front like this, not like this, because that would create another yarn over. It's got to go between the needles around to the front. Then you could go through and purl it. And then now you've captured both loops. What I was doing on Scolopendra, see if I can there we go. What I was doing on Scolopendra was, instead of knitting and then purling, is I was knitting and then going back here to this back leg of the stitch. Can you see that? Going through the back leg of the stitch like so, and knitting it, which also captures the double yarn over, but what that ends up doing is that twists that second stitch. And when that happens, it closes up. So this double yarn over essentially becomes a yarn over and a half. So here is, see if I can get all of these in the same shot. Again, bear with me because this isn't blocked, so it's going to be a little squirrely. So a full double yarn over, a yarn over and a half basically, even with blocking, and a regular yarn over. See how that and that is not that different in size? Whereas, forgive me, whereas that and that are definitely much larger than each other. That's a full double yarn over. This one, if you'll notice, is also in stockinette, and I'm using my sheep. Now, because I'm doing a full double yarn over rather than a yarn over and a half, this may change the overall shape from this heart shape. It may end up being more of a crescent shape. I'm not sure. We'll just have to go further along and see. But that is the only update I have this week as for knitting Scolopendra. But like I mentioned in the overview, I have worked on writing the pattern for it. I have it writ up as the way I'm knitting this one currently. And there are 4 variations to this shawl as of right now. And what I did is I wrote up one pattern, and then at the bottom I put basically 3 separate footnotes explaining how you could do this same shawl in the 3 other ways. So that in essence, instead of writing 4 patterns, I could write 1 with some variations on it, which saves a lot of brain power and time, which some days I'm short on both. So I am looking for test knitters, and I believe I may have touched on last week what a test knitter is. A test knitter is you can send in someone and say, hey, would you try and knit this for me, to see if it's easy to understand and even feasible to do. And then they can give you feedback. So it's kind of a hopefully constructive criticism. and just a sounding board. So I'm excited to do this. I will not send that off until I get this particular section of it finished, where it's off the needles and I can see what it's going to do. Then I may send out for test knitters. I may go ahead and knit all 4 varieties. I'm not sure, but if I do, this one doesn't count as one. And the reason is because I work these double yarn overs differently than the way I want to work them now. So that changes the size and that changes the shape. So this is just simply not a full-size swatch, but it's a very large size swatch. And I'm okay with that. So that is my update on Scolopendra. Now I will show you, remember that finished one was called Seaweed, or Retro. This color, let me zoom in here, is called Seaweed, which I'm sure you can guess by my little bit of confusion. So the original one had 4 colors in it. This one has 5. This one right here is not the same as this. In fact, you can see right here, that join connects the 2 colors. It's an abrupt, instant color change, whereas some things may be very gradual, such as this yarn. It's more of a gradual shift from this one to this one, to this one to this one. Now they are obvious color changes, but it goes through those color changes a lot less rapid than this one does. So my little sheep marker, who I've decided is named Shaun, after the show Shaun the Sheep from the franchise of Wallace and Gromit, of which I have no copyright, trademark, any of that, so keep this on the down low. Reminds me of just Shaun the Sheep. Anyways, Shaun says hi. So that is Scolopendra and all the information that I have on that. My mystery project is something that I knit up very quickly. I started it on May 4th and finished it on the 11th. It is a toy, and I will show you what it looks like on this view, and then we'll take it over to the overhead to show you a little bit more details. But as of right now, I would like to introduce you to Gnahum Gnewman. It is a little gnome. It is hard to see because this was a full-size sample, because I did not know how much yarn I was going to need for this. I did not design this, though I wish I would have. This is the pattern Never Not Gnoming, and I am thoroughly pleased with how it turned out. So like I said, we'll go over to the overhead and look at details a little bit more close up. Okay, here we have Gnahum, which is what I've named this gnome. The pattern is Norbert, and that is the size large in the pattern packet Never Not Gnoming. So first of all, it's a stockinette hat. It's knit completely in the round all the way. The only thing that's not knit in the round is the nose and the beard. The hat and the body are one piece, but you pick up stitches and knit on. Let's zoom in and take a closer look and see what we have going on in this. Okay, as you can see, the little V's, so that means this is in stockinette. It starts with just 3 stitches, knit in the round, and then you increase to 9 or 6, and then so on and so forth. And then you flip the brim up. It's hard to see because it's all the same color, but then you pick up stitches and join back in the round, and you knit the body. Then when that's done, you knit your beard. There's 2 different options. There's the vertical beard, and then there's one where the beard runs side to side rather than up and down like this one is. And then you knit the little nose. Since this is a full-size swatch, I didn't care about the color transition, but I do like how it looks like he's wearing like a shirt that matches his hat, and then a pair of little pair of pants. A pattern also come with instructions for knitting arms, but I like it like it is. I don't think I need to do the arms. Now, it is stuffed while you are still knitting. When you get to about here, you start stuffing it. Then you knit the rest of this. And the only way to do that, because it's fully stuffed and has the weight in there, so that way it stands upright, is you have to set it down in a cup to hold all of the weight while you do that. And this is really fiddly. But I think I did okay. Of course, each one will get better and better. So I mentioned this was filled or stuffed and weighted. And let me show you what I used to do that. So to fill it, I simply used polyfill. It's a plastic fluff. If you was to open up a pillow, this is probably what you would find. It's just plastic fluff. For weights, I had many options, but I chose marbles. I figured that would give me plenty of weight. It took about 12 marbles. I didn't count, but based on memory, that's about how many I used. And they're just regular size marbles. Then they go on the bottom, and then you finish knitting, and then sew up and seal off the bottom. Now, the yarn that I used is this yarn here. This is all that's left. This skein, this little cake, knit Mom's hat and the gnome, and I still have this much left over. So this is Lion Brand in their Mandala, Ombre line. The colorway is Felicity, and that is kind of a rose color, kind of a rusted pale rose, and then there's a white with some bubblegum pink, and then there's black and white, and then there's some pinkish black and white. I don't know if that's fully showing up on camera or not. It is a worsted weight. The skein comes at 150 grams, and that gives you 344 yards of yarn. Now that we've seen the details more close up, I would like to discuss how this particular project came about, because I know some people have asked me to talk about my process of picking a pattern to completing a pattern and what all that entails in between. So I have written down some notes, so if you see me glance down, I'm looking down to make sure that I'm giving you the accurate information. So we will begin. I learned about this particular pattern on a YouTube playlist that I was watching of a knitter, and the channel is Purl Together. And she was talking to a woman about what she calls the Year of Gnomes. And the woman she was talking to was the designer for the pattern Never Not Gnoming that I knit. A lot of ends in there all together. And so as soon as I seen the gnome pattern, I knew I had to have it. So I went right then, bought the pattern, looked it over, and then made my game plan. So the pattern was actually knit using fingering weight yarn and small needles, because you need to knit it dense. But I have, as you can see behind me, I have a large stash of worsted and Aran weight yarn, not fingering weight. So I wanted to know what it would take to knit the pattern, which the pattern is called Norbert, because there's 3 different sizes in the Never Not Gnoming pattern packet. And this Gnahum is the pattern Norbert. I know that sounds very confusing, and I apologize. So I asked the designer, I said, what would be a good way for me to figure out how to, gauge how much yarn it is that I'm going to need? And she said she is making a database of people. When they finish their project, they can leave their needle sizes and how much yarn they use for each individual piece, because there are actually 4 pieces to this. There's the hat, the body, the beard, and the nose. And I was not sure how much I was going to need, so I had a skein of yarn left over from Mom's ponytail hat, and I figured that would be a perfect thing because I knew I had plenty of yarn in that. So I was going through and knitting along and knitting the pattern, so I did not care that the color transition and the body, for the most part, are all the same color, and the bottom of the body, the nose, and the beard all being the same color. I didn't care because it's a full-size swatch. Now moving forward, I will be knitting one of these every single month as a form of decoration. So I'm going to go ahead and start in January. No, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to January and knit the gnomes up to current, and then the first of every month I will start the new gnome, and then we'll show it in the video. It'll probably be in the second or third video of the month, but for sure will be the last video of the month. So these will be put out for decorations, and I actually got that part of the idea from one of our neighbors. Her mother crocheted us a medallion to set on our coffee table, and each medallion had a color palette that was specifically chosen for each month. Some months were easier to choose than others, such as July and December. The color combos are very obvious, but months like May and June are a little bit trickier, a little bit more abstract to try and fix. But hopefully I've got a color palette that makes sense to you, but I am very happy with the color palette, so we will see how that turns out. Now I do have an example of that medallion here handy, so I will grab that and show you what that looks like, and then we will also go to the overhead and I'll show you that a little bit more up closely as well. Now the reason we don't use this on our coffee table is quite simple. With the dog as large as Midnight, a coffee table is not a good idea. Her tail is a force of nature that does nothing but cause destruction. So we just opted to get rid of the coffee table. Well, that meant we had no place to put our medallions, so they got put away in storage. We have thought about putting it over the back of one of the chairs, but we'll see. It's not a crucial thing. It's just a little bit of extra fluff, if you will. So here is the medallion. And I know that's hard to kind of see. I will do my best to film it overhead, but as you can see, there's 3 colors, and this one happens to be sparkly, and this would be actually is the wrong side. And up close you can see those ridges, and again I'll do this all in the overhead again, but just for the sake of discussion, this is the right side, so you can see it's a little bit more squared, whereas there's raised ridges. So this is what inspired knitting all of these gnomes. Now, along with knitting all of these gnomes, I have decided to make this family, the Gnewman family. I decided to put a little back history with it and just make it a little bit more fun. Gnomes are fun anyways, but I figured a little bit of extra whimsy is always welcome. So what I did is, in my mind, the Gnewman clan has a magazine that features articles and family favorite recipes that just as it pertains to the Gnewman family. Wedding announcements, obituaries, and the like. So I decided that this family has been around for many, 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 many generations. So they would have quite a few gnomes that have graced this magazine. So I decided that this year they were going to come out with Gnome of the Year. And each month's article in the magazine, each month, they were going to pick a particular gnome from the family history and highlight and talk about that, and talk about the family histories, favorite recipes, why they were chosen, and the like. So each month throughout the year will have its own little backstory and why it was chosen as the Gnome of the Month as it pertains to the entire Gnome of the Year. So I hope you look forward to seeing more about the gnomes and hearing more about the gnomes, because I am very excited to get going. It is a very enjoyable project. It is a unique project in that there's a certain amount of difficulty at the very end of the project that I will talk about on a future video. I am making notes of when I say on a future video, so I make sure that I actually film those future videos. First off, I apologize for all of the background stuff. Normally you wouldn't be able to see that, but I wanted you to be able to see the medallion in its entirety before we zoom in and take a closer look. So we will do that now. Okay. Now this is crochet, and I am not an expert in crochet. I have crocheted, I think, a grand total of 3 times in my life, and I was not good at it, so I don't do that. But this is worked. It is crochet. You do these few stitches, and then it works out radially from that. And then you have the 3 colors, and it's actually a very large piece of fabric, but the way that it's worked and the way it ends up setting, it sets up where the ripples kind of become an accordion. And like I said, each month has its own color combination, and this one happens to be December's. So here, let's see if I can get a shot of this where it's easy to see. Okay, so right along here, get the wand, you'll see 3 ridges, and I know it's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can tilt. There you go. See those ridges that stand up proud? That is the wrong side. The right side, from what I've been told, is what you see when you see these kind of squares. They're mostly square. That is the right side, unless I'm mistaken, which is entirely possible. But this and the pattern for Never Not Gnoming just seemed like a great thing to put together and make one gnome for each month. So I have started, or I have not started. I am going to start either this evening or tomorrow. I will start the gnome for January, and more on him in the next video. Now, what's interesting about this nose is you knit it flat in stockinette, and then you pull the 2 short, there you can see the edge of that, and you pull the 2 short sides, because you're only knitting 6 stitches across. Pull the 2 short sides together, sew those up, and you leave the edges alone, completely alone. And what you're doing is you're relying on the fact that it's stockinette for it to want to curl and make that kind of a little bumpy nose. So this is one of the times when stockinette curl works in your benefit. In last week's video, I included a bonus clip, and it was knitting ASMR of me winding a cake of yarn off of a swift using my ball winder. This week, instead of doing something similar, I decided to showcase a puzzle that Mom and Kyle and I knit this last weekend, because it's very appropriate for this video and a little bit about my interests. So I'm going to back up so that way you can see it in the full shot and, enjoy this. See the pretty kitties and the yarn? This was a bunch of fun to put together. I bought the puzzle at Ace and Mod Podged it last night so it all stayed together. And I just really enjoyed doing this together with them. So I kind of come up and show you some. I apologize for the glare. Just some fluffy kitties setting in a bunch of yarn. So you know the knitters or crocheters are loving that because of all the cat hair. But I hope you enjoyed this week's video, learned something, and moving forward, may have some ideas of future videos.